All right. Well, Alyssa, as you know, in our last episode of the podcast, we had promised in the preview that we were going to talk about the atrophying of the social muscles on our teams, as a result of more remote work and people being less present together in workspaces. And we never got to it. And so that was an unfulfilled promise. So we were going to start with that today. And the cost of so many people either not being in a space together at work, and or remote working. One of the things that I hear from my clients over and over again is we are not connecting. We're lacking that connection because we're not together, but also because everyone's going at 10,000 RPMs right now, and it's been like this for months, and there's just no reprieve from it. So what is the cost of that on a team?
I think the costs are still to be determined, right? We're this living collective trauma that we do not know what we are sacrificing of ourselves and of each other at the current time. But I can tell you how it feels to me, and what I hear from my clients in the coaching realm is that deep sense of connection that we get from those that are in the professional space. So, we might be connected in the terms of, we're connected to our children's remote schooling teachers. We're connected to our teams via virtual context, but we're not connected in the same way that we were previously. And so those muscles that we use, the smiling, because now it's behind a mask, right? The skin hunger that we now have to manage.
Was that skin hunger?
Skin hunger, it's a thing. Look it up, man.
I'm afraid to Google that. Okay.
Well, it is. I should say, you might have to put some kind of scholarly research on skin hunger,
and make sure the kids are not in the room.
That's right. But it is truly a thing.
What is
Our
skin
bodies yearn for this kind of connection, whether it is the handshake, the hug. I mean, it is super isolating right now.
Absolutely.
To have the only contact and connection that we have be through a screen or behind a mask. And so those muscles that we usually use to put on our smiley, happy face to go out into the world start to atrophy.
Absolutely. I've not heard that term skin hunger before, but you're spot on in terms of, as human beings, we are made to connect. We are made to gather and form relationships and, work in villages because it is safer, and it, all of the good brain chemicals that come with those types of interactions and connections, we need that. And I think if you are keeping up with a lot of the news right now around people's remote work experiences, what you're hearing from people is, okay, we tried it, we figured out what works. A lot of people really miss the office. A lot of people are really missing and hoping to return to shared workspaces. And maybe it won't be like it was. I don't know that a lot of folks will go back full time the way that they were, but I think you are going to see a lot of hybrid models where people get the chance to work from home, but also in order to satisfy, was it skin hunger? Did I get it right?
That's correct.
To satisfy their skin hunger, to ensure that the kinds of sophisticated relationships that lead to high-functioning teams are allowed to form, that they are gathering in a space together. Because one of the things that we know about human nature is that when you put distance between people, physical distance, we become less likely to regulate our behavior. It's why people on the internet get keyboard courage and comment on social media and on newspaper articles and things like that, and just say really direct and at times horrendous things to each other. There are no consequences to it because of that distance. We don't show up in that way when the person is sitting across from us or is in the hallway.
Oh, isn't that the truth? So, what do you see as the biggest kinds of actions or thought patterns or strategies that our boss heroes can take into trying to combat that atrophy, that loss of camaraderie, that loss of connection?
Yeah. Well, right now in these environments, we have to find a way to work on it together. And that's hard. It's hard to find time. But that time can just be even 5-10 minutes at the beginning of a Zoom huddle or meeting. And maybe if we just do it once a week, we can keep some of that social atrophy at bay. And when I say work on it, I mean even just doing things like our camaraderie question of the week, where people find things in common with each other and access each other's humanity a little bit. I think there are some other things, though, that teams can do. Partnering is really important. So if I've got a team of 10, maybe I find some creative ways to get employee number 1 and 7 to work together and employee number 2 and 4 to work together if the nature of their work doesn't normally cause them to interact.
Oh, that's a great idea. Okay.
And I think we can also ask them to do that in a virtual environment where they can see each other. There's a big debate right now in folks who work in organizational development and who are studying sort of the psychology of remote work about whether we should require people to turn their cameras on. When they get into these kinds of Zoom meetings and whatnot. There are two schools of thought. One is that turning the cameras on removes some of that isolation and ensures that some of that human contact is taking place. There's a lesser degree of distance between people when you can see each other. I think we can all agree that that is true.
That is true.
And so there is some psychological value in seeing each other, and your team reaps the benefit. On the other hand, some people's home lives right now, if you'll excuse the expression, are a shit show. They're homeschooling. They've got kids running around in the background. They may not have had time to shower and do makeup. Their house maybe needs more attention than they've been able to give it. Maybe there's some distress taking place there that they don't want their coworkers to see. And so when you force people to turn their cameras on, and this is the other side of the debate, is you're actually adding a layer of anxiety, adding a layer of difficulty to folks who are working from home.
Yeah. I hadn't been acquainted with that debate. So thanks for bringing that up. I want to instantaneously, I was like, oh, no, people shouldn't do that. Like they shouldn't be forced to do that.
Right.
Because it feels like an invasion of my space, and I feel like, we're being tugged in 1,000 directions to your point of the distress and the distraction and all of what's going on. And that just seems like another huge burden where someone wants to watch over me.
Yes.
But there is that other part that goes, well, wait a minute. If I, as the leader, and you as the employee have this like real direct trust with one another, that it's not about overseeing your productivity or anything like that. Rather, it is truly just about authentically trying to reduce that isolation that is absolutely happening for all of us, then that is absolutely something that we should consider. But I think it's definitely a relationship by relationship thing for me. Is it has to be really on stable ground with lots of trust on both sides.
I have this conversation a lot because I'm doing a lot of virtual meetings, virtual training, where we're bringing staff collectively to that event. And over and over again, a lot of the people who are hiring me to do that work with them are saying, well, we're going to require that the cameras be on. And I'll say, well, let's talk about that. Because if we can accomplish your goals for the training or for the event without mandating that, then should we?
Yeah.
Or why is it important to you that we have cameras on? Let's talk about that. So we'll have some of that conversation. The general advice that I give to folks who are asking their personnel to work from home and participate in a lot of online gatherings is that if you want cameras to be on, number one, communicate that expectation ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
That this is going to be a meeting where we need to see each other. Number two, don't make every meeting a camera on required meeting. Spread it out a little bit, right? Give people a chance to not shower if if they need to for that day. And then the third thing I would say is that even if you have a cameras on event, you clearly define the exceptions to that rule. And you give people permission that if, hey, under these circumstances, something happens, you need to step out. If having your camera on makes you feel unsafe or makes you, if it feels so intrusive that it prohibits you from being able to be fully focused and fully participate, then turn the camera off.
Wow, those are really good tactical guidelines. I think that our boss heroes out there can take a lot away from. I think one of the main things that popped up for me whenever you're talking about safety, we talk about the whole impetus of this being those social muscles atrophying, and what paralyzes those muscles, what has the opportunity, fight or flight, right, is compromising our safety.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really think about what it is, what that means to you, what compromises your safety, what causes your social muscles, those things that are going to take you right away from connection and camaraderie. And that might not always be the same for those that you lead.
Right. And it goes to that noticing that you're so fond of talking about. And I think this is a kind of debrief that bosses can do with their direct reports every once in a while. And I'm also a big fan of the boss phone call, right? We don't always have to Zoom. We don't always have to Teams. We don't always have to WebEx, right? You can just schedule a call and say, I'm going to call you. And we'll do our meeting via the telephone. And,
wow.
Yeah, right? Old school. And I think bosses can ask their team members to notice what their experience is like in those virtual environments. So what is it like for you when we have these meetings? What is it like? What are you feeling? What are you noticing about your comfort level and your sharpness and whatnot when the camera's on, when the camera's off, when we give you the agenda ahead of time, when we just leave open time for discussion? What are the optimal conditions for you? And then if that boss is taking notes, they can start to notice themes and patterns that emerge across the people that they supervise, and they can tailor the remote work environment to them in that way.
Magic. That's where the magic happens. You see the problem, you solve the problem through that level of deep connection and trying to start building back up that level of connection in a very real and very specific way for each of your team members.
Well, folks, we want you to tell us what you think. I'm over on Instagram at JoeMull77. Also, be sure to like our BossBetter podcast page on Facebook, where you can leave comments and ask questions. You can suggest ideas for the show. If you would like to go to the BossBetter podcast page and agree in a really specific and boisterous kind of way that I do look like Hugh Jackman, then you should do that. That is allowed. And please also remember that our ability to keep doing these shows depends on you. So please subscribe, write a review, and thank you for helping spread the word and help us grow this show.